How healthy is competition for comics? This came up recently. Rob Liefeld wrote a tweet talking about how he loved comics, he loved the art, he loved the storytelling, he loved the business, loved the people, and he loved the competition of it. And it got me thinking, do people still compete in comics? Is that still a thing that people do? Hey everybody, this is Perch. Comic books have had a long time rivalry between Marvel and DC, and usually it's fairly good natured. I mean, ultimately, comic books was a small community, and so you'd see the different companies poke at each other. DC was the distinguished competition, and Marvel were the assholes. I think is how they referred to each other. No, I'm just kidding. I don't. It was always kind of this thing where it felt like a friendly rivalry until it would kind of bubble over in certain events. I remember San Diego Comic Con back in I want to say 2003 or 2004, and it was they're kind of jibing back and forth at on a panels, one Marvel panel, one DC panel, and then by the time it got to Sunday, the little jabs were like knives out, so to speak. It was well, their business practices are lousy. We pay more. I mean, it started to get more mean. And you see that, Dan Didio, in the way that he would run the business back when he worked for DC, was a little bit more sharp. Joe Quesada would have kind of various moments where he would be a little bit more sharp. It was never outright like their comic sucks, but it would be like, well, we have the superior characters and everything else. But there was that competitive edge there. And in the '80s, in particular, it was sort of like WWF and WCW back in the day. They would compete and they would fight, and then every now and then, like a John Byrne would move to DC, and you would get kind of more flurries of fighting and things would go on. But and there's definitely it was taken personal at the person level. Like if you talk to people within Marvel when John Byrne hopped over to DC, there was some real anger about what he did. There was some definite hurt feelings and some the feeling of betrayal, and that has stuck with John Byrne. I would argue even today, even though a lot of the people who work in Marvel weren't even around during that period of time, there's still this feeling like he betrayed us, he stabbed us in the back. I may be wrong there. I'm not sure, but these grudges feel bigger than life. Today, the competition in comics feels very, very light. DC and Marvel do not have the same kind of battle. In fact, in many ways, what it feels like is that Marvel and DC are no longer fighting. It feels like Marvel has kind of established themselves as the winner. They've been winning unit share and market share day in day out for quite a while now, certainly since Rebirth, and even then before that for a long stretch. And DC, it's not like there that tension exists between the companies. And Image has always kind of taken various shots at the different publishers, but even them, they kind of just stay in their lane. And everybody just seems to be a lot more passive about the whole thing. You do not see the same kind of aggression, the same kind of hunger for competition until you get down to the creator level, where it's mainly social media fighting. And so where the big competitive aspects have gone are around the kind of the indie crowdfunding and then some of the creators who work for the big two. And while the passion is, it's a good fight that in theory is supposed to bring out the best in people. I'm not sure it actually does that. The problem is with the kind of indie crowdfunded fight versus the big two fight. It's not about the comics. It's about other issues. It's about social issues. It's about kind of how people treat each other on media. It's about respect. It's about these other topics, and maybe those topics are fine, but it's not really about the book. When you see like a person like an indie comic creator on his or her YouTube channel take shots at a comic, it's usually like, look at this trash art, look at what it's become, look at how cheap this company is, and how it's the once great kind of comic model is dead because they're outsourcing their art and they're doing it. It's just that's the way the argument is. It's much more personal, much more kind of attacking that model. And on the other end, when you saw Gail Simone and Richard Pace took shots at the military, not Jawbreakers, the other one, the black and white one, comic that Meyer did. It wasn't about like, hey, this isn't a good world or this isn't a good value. It was this artist doesn't belong to be in comics, and who even gave this person a pencil? And it was all way more personal, way more. It wasn't about the book anymore, and so that's what's currently is our competition. That's what replaced the old rivalries between companies, is more of these personal shots back and forth at people that are questionable if they actually add real value to the comics that are being promoted. I think competition. So I go back to Rob Liefeld's tweet. I think competition is an important part of comics. I think that there should be this healthy rivalry of who's putting out the better comic this month. Is it Batman? Is it Spider Man? And which character? Two very different personalities of characters. So which one are we liking? I think that's very very healthy, and I think the more of that, the better. I think that translates to in shop conversations about comics and about how which character is better than the other, and which comic is better, which writer do we want to follow, and which artist is great, and who's a big up and comer. Those conversations in the shop are healthy. They bring in business. They get people excited about comics, and they're good. That's one thing that crowd-funded comics struggle to replicate because they don't sell through a shop. So the conversation is not natural to go into a shop and want to talk about something you didn't even buy there. People could do it, but that's one thing that the crowdfunded comics it's the one thing they don't have going for them is you don't have that natural kind of in-store marketing through the fight. Now you may argue having an argument on Twitter is being exposed to far more people than an in-shop argument ever would, and that's true. But the fights on Twitter and social media also don't build the camaraderie and the memories over time either. I mean, do you remember the fight you had on Twitter 3 months ago? I doubt it. That's the thing that we've lost with how competition has gone, and where where the competitive aspect of comics is. I think the other thing is that because the comic industry is small, and there's a feeling of not desperation. I mean, comics are doing well. The comic business is healthy-ish. I've done other videos on this. People at this point either agree or disagree. I've tried to make the nuanced point that comics are doing fine for what they are, and what they are isn't big enough, but they're not in imminent nature of collapse either. It's kind of this awkward middle ground. But because it's in that state, a lot of creators, a lot of companies are unwilling to really kind of put things on the line. I was at the Emerald City Comic Con. Is that right? Yeah, 2 years ago, 2018. And I asked, like, hey, the world's greatest comic magazine that is on the Fantastic Four, or I don't know if they're doing it in the new run. I need to look at it now. I don't remember if it's on the cover, but Invincible kind of stole that and said the best comic magazine today. It was that was a friendly jab, kind of this is a great comic. And I said, why don't more comics do that? Why don't they market it themselves as this is an amazing comic, this is the best comic that's out today, you should read it. Saga has done that kind of marketing for itself. Why don't more comics do that? Why don't more publishers do that? And the response I got from an editor, this is an editor at Marvel, was, well, I don't think we necessarily know that our comics are the best. I mean, who's to say? Who are we to say if a comic's the best or not? I'm like, well, you're the people making it. You are the best to say. You should say. I mean, whether you're right or wrong, I mean, that's like standing up for your product. It'd be like a football team coming out and they give the pregame interview, and the speech is, well, we may win, but probably not. We're not that good a team. We have some people on here, but the other team's probably better. I mean, they practice harder. We don't really practice hard. I mean, could you imagine? That'd be the hilarious interview. But that's what it feels like. It feels like people are kind of self-selecting out before the game has even gotten going, and I find that very strange. But anyway, to wrap this up, I think competition is a really important factor of comics. I think we've lost it somewhere along the way. It's just that feeling of competition is nowhere near where it used to be, and it feels both softer from the company side, and also have gotten away from comics and into just kind of personal shots on the creator side, and none of which I think is particularly useful for actually providing true competition in comics. But what do you think? What do you think about competition? Is this something you think about? Is this something you enjoy? Do you like seeing the companies kind of battle back and forth amongst themselves? Do you like when the fans do the same? What does competition mean to you with comics? Leave me a comment below. Like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.